This was a book that she was working on. She did the manuscript for, and they were starting to look for somebody to illustrate it. And I was had been with Viking and Penguin, and she's with Philomel, so they're right next door to each other. And her editor at the time really liked the artwork. Actually, the one behind me, the elephant from Meet Me at the Moon. And my agent called me one day and she said, "So I have a proposition for you. I can't really tell you anything, but you have to say yes." I was like, you got to give me something here. And so it was kind of a fun little thing to have that surprise. But yeah, so I read it and I said, gosh, I'd love to work on this and love to, support anything that's teaching kids about animals and the endangered ones. And that's how that got going. So I usually start with these tiny little sketches with all my books. And part of that has to do with not wanting to fall in love with a product. So remember early on, I said how much I love detail and stuff. So it's really easy for me to kind of just start noodling away and get so into like the eyelashes and whatever. And then I'm so in love with this drawing, but it doesn't work in the story. So I start all of my books, just like this is that thing when I showed you earlier, but and these are just photocopies, but small sketches that are super rough. And I can tear them up, throw them away, and rip a page out and put it over here. So I'm not super attached to it. And once I get that going, I usually submit it at this phase to my editor, whoever I'm working with. And they've seen enough of my books so they can get an idea of how it's going to look larger. And then once that's approved and we mess with it and move words around and change this and that, I make it larger and I do really big sketches that are just really tight pencil drawings. I don't work on the computer at all. I occasionally use it just to scan things in and move stuff around, but I love working with pencils and papers and whatnot. I love drawing. I love brainstorming. And I think what I love about picture books is the problem solving on every single page that, there's typically 32 or 40 pages, like they have a certain set amount of pages that you're filling. They have the end papers that sort of tell part of the story. So there's all these sort of constraints around writing a book, and it's without even starting it. And I kind of love that part. I love this, just figuring out the words, the page turn, all that stuff. Anyway, yeah. So once those are done, I go on and do color studies, and depending on the book, I sometimes do just little tiny swatches for each page, or if it's like Night Animals is all kind of black and the animals are all the same. So it just depends. I had a really cool thing on If I Had a Horse. I was at a residency in Wyoming and I was going to work on that project the whole time. And I did these little color studies. They're about this big. I could find one and show it to you. And I scanned them in and I sent them to my editor, and I just said, I can't reproduce this large. And he said, "You're done. That's it." He said, "We're going to use the sketches." So they blew those up, these little tiny sketches. And it was really a neat thing. And actually some of that work is in the Eric Carle Museum in a show right now on horses. And they chose some of and I told her, I said, they're really small, even though the pages are big. So they're all a little bit different like that. And then Meet Me at the Moon, that one's kind of a little different style, where I think it's mulberry paper, and I put it onto watercolor paper so it has all this texture in it. And I use that, like elephant skin has so much texture, or the whale's skin, I use it on that one. And then those are sort of just layers of gouache built up. I feel stronger as an artist than as a writer. So I usually start with pictures, but not all of them. In fact, I'm working on a little story right now. I can show you how tiny the sketches are. What the heck? It's right here. These are actually blown way up, but these are how I start them. They're just super rough. And the original of these, I think, are about this big. So I just start off with these tiny little scribbles and sketches. I usually have a kind of idea what the story's about. A couple of them I've written the text first, the manuscript first, but mostly I just start drawing and then kind of work in what these animals would be saying to each other. And I have seen some of the animals that I've drawn. Some of them I'll do a lot of research. Like I just finished a book on prairie dogs, and living out here in Colorado, there's tons of them. And so it's kind of fun. I could just go outside and sit down and whoop, there they are cruising around. But I do a lot of research on the animals just to kind of get a feel for, what do they do and how can I bring those natural characteristics into my own story of them to show what their what they're doing. For instance, the prairie dog one is about a prairie dog who's scared to go outside, which is reasonable because they have so many predators. So, but for kids, it's all about fear. And his little friends eventually learned that he is really scared, and they kind of help him face his fears in a way. So it's a true thing in a certain way, because prairie dogs do have all these predators, and it's valid that they would have these fears. And yet, kids can relate to, I think, that. And then their friends helping them overcome these fears. I think my biggest thing is sometimes I think about something I want to write about. Like if I want to write about, like the prairie dogs was about fear. And so I sometimes come up with a subject first, and then I'll start researching animals and see what are some of their characteristics. Or maybe if I'm reading about a certain kind of animal and I learn that they do, this or that, and I go, oh my God, that would be such a cool way to tell this story of it going through this transformation or discovery or whatever it is. So a little bit backwards in that. Although We Will Live in This Forest Again was told after the wildfires that I was in California in 2017. And that was really neat because those animals, I really did see them. Like they really did come back, and they were the ones that were so great in showing their resilience to what had happened. And their whole forest is gone, right? And yet there they are, and a little bit of rain, and little weeds come up, and they start eating it, and they know how to survive. So, I wish I'd gone on some safaris. I traveled with a friend of mine who's a photographer, and we didn't have any money when we were there, so we went on the lamest, I'll put safari in air quotes. And I mean, we rented 3 donkeys and we walked through the Maasai, and it was comical on 1,000 levels. But yeah, that one, I don't know. Some of them I just would go there and see these animals and kind of sketch them a little bit and learn about them. But I don't know, it's just different, seeing something in its true form in the wild is so different than on TV or at the zoo, but seeing them out there, like eating these giant freaking trees that from far away, they look like a tree that's this big, but then you see a giraffe under it and you're just like, what? Like the whole scale is just out of control. It's so wild. I love giraffes. And they're so awkward, like in a way, they're so graceful, the way they kind of slowly gallop across the land or something. But when you see them drink and they're just trying to like spread their legs wide enough so they can reach the water, and you're like, how do you guys survive? It's amazing.